Something that stood out, and I find this to be very true, that it is not uncommon for, and we're talking, I mean, this is men and women, but that people don't realize they're being abused.
Exactly.
So let's kind of
Exactly.
talk about that a little bit, because that is a bit, I experienced that in my own life as well.
Hmm.
I didn't
Hmm.
recognize the abuse of my parents until just a few years ago.
Hmm.
I had been on my healing journey since I was 19. I had done a lot more of the beginning of the deeper healing in my 30s, but I didn't even see my parents' responsibility in all this until much later.
Hmm.
And I was helping other
Hmm.
women heal themselves. So this is not an
Yeah.
uncommon thing. And can you talk about that a little bit?
I think if we're raised with harsh parenting,
Ah,
and I certainly was, and I was also raised in a very judgmental, harsh religion where I was taught to not value myself and not have boundaries. And I think we grow up integrating that a certain kind of interpersonal interaction is just
that's a
normal.
normal behavior.
It's a normal behavior. And so we
Oh,
don't see it. We're just blind to it. And we mix up
that's true.
love, which should be nurturing, which should make us feel
Right,
safe. We mix that up with trauma.
right.
And so what many of us call love is actually more of a trauma bond. And we can be very
Yep.
attached to people who hurt us
Yes.
and not aware enough of our own self-worth and value that, you know what, nobody should be yelling at me, nobody should threaten to slap me, nobody should, push my body around.
Yeah.
We just don't see it as abuse because we're sensitized or desensitized to
And it's
it.
probably more so, of course, with the verbal and the emotional abuse because it's not somebody hitting you, so you have nothing to show for that, right? You don't have a bruise, you don't have a.
100%.
And that is, and in that one, but all of them are bad, but it seems like that one is more difficult at times just because trying to get other people to believe you.
100%. And even now I talk to so many women who are in therapy, and it's clear they're being emotionally abused, financially
Oh
abused,
yeah.
called terrible names, blamed for everything in life, and they're suffering and they've got PTSD from it. And when I'll suggest, you've got to get out of this, well, I don't have a place to go, I don't have money. I'll say, you know what? I used to work in a women's shelter program. There are shelters where you will get help and it's free. And they'll say, but I'm not really abused because he doesn't hit me. And I'm always trying to, we think at this point in time there's been enough books written that people
Yes.
would understand this, but they really don't still.
Unless they're looking for it, they're not going to know to go. If they, unless they realize, well, am I being abused? Let me go look and see.
Yeah.
They're not going to know to do that. I had one person that went through my workshop. And bless her heart, she was a friend of mine, and she actually was going through it to help support another friend of hers that was going through it. And she starts telling me, she says, I grew up in a home where my parents drank. They were both alcoholics, but they were fun. Like they weren't mean. And so I don't really consider myself being abused because they didn't, yell at me. We had a good time. I don't tell people, no, 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 you were abused because I'm not a therapist. So that's not my place to say. But the truth of the matter is that one I find pretty common too. And that is
Yes.
they are not in a state to meet your needs, first of all.
100%. You nailed it. Yep. Yeah. They can't be attuned to you when they're drunk.
Right.
They just can't.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And so I just it surprises me, like you say, in this day and age, that especially because there's so much more information out there about trauma. There's podcasts, there's books, there's all kinds of different things out there now, and different modalities that are actually really helping us to heal. It's
Yes.
shocking that it is still so common that people don't realize that they were being abused.
Yeah, it shows the power of I call it, it's almost a negative hallucination.
Hmm.
Rather than hallucinations seeing things that aren't there, it's like we often have this natural tendency not to see things that are there. So
Yeah,
it's the reverse of a hallucination.
right.
We just don't realize. And I think, when we're not raised in a nurturing home, we learn to not listen to our own emotions. It's just a way of survival. So we
Yeah.
sort of become numb
Hmm.
to pain. And we also may tell ourselves, but I'm strong, as I did. Well, I'm strong. I've got all these tools. I can handle it. And again, that's a way of just not understanding and having insight. We also, as I think many women do, I certainly did, believe that the good side of him
Yes.
is the real him, and this other side, well, that's just a symptom, and in the future, that's going to go away. And in truth, for somebody with a pathological personality who's basically predatory or cruel, that side doesn't go away. And that side they may have a good side, but that's very much integrated with the cruelty. And that is a part of who they are. And I had to get to a place where I understood that, where I could give up that fantasy of
Yeah,
change.
and I'll be honest with you, in my first marriage, I did the same thing. It was just, oh, but I know he can. And I just believed in him
Yeah,
and I could see the
yeah,
good in him and I could see the possibilities and I hung on to that. And even though after a while, it's almost like an addiction. Well, you say it's
yeah,
a trauma bond. It really is a trauma bond because
yeah,
when I was deciding to file for divorce and I'd had enough, the unraveling of our lives was so incredibly difficult, and it was trying to break that trauma bond. And I
yeah.
didn't really do a great job because I turned around and jumped right back into another relationship that ended up being a narcissistic relationship. And that's hard
Hmm.
for me to say, and it feels embarrassing, but that's what it was. I mean, I didn't know it at the time. I know it now and I understand it.
Right,
But that
right.
that was the most. If I remember standing at the counter, handing the paperwork over, and just bawling my eyes out because that's not what I wanted. I didn't want to get a divorce. I didn't marry him so that I
No,
could divorce him. But it was
no.
just I got to the point where I just knew things weren't going to change, and I had changed, and he had not.
Right, right. I think that's the key. It's finding our path to growing out of abuse, and everybody will do it somewhat differently. But I think friends have a lot to do with it. You know,
Hmm.
when we have really good friends who love us and nurture us, and we find people we can be honest with
Yeah.
about what we're living with, and then we can get feedback from other people who really bond in a healthy way with us, and we can get the feedback that, this is not okay and you don't deserve this. And I think that's the important point about not keeping secrets and not being isolated in the story.